Hear me okay? There we are.
Hello.
Hi.
All right.
So, as you can see, I don't have a very good looking background.
It's all right. It's
make
all
my own bed
very
nice. Yeah, I should sound. I have my good music microphone with me, so I've got that all running. Yeah, I've got quite a good setup here, and should have it.
So I'm actually hearing an echo when I.
Hold on, I silenced my phone. It was beeping a lot. So you hear an echo now?
Let's see. Yeah, I do.
Ooh,
So
that's not good.
I will probably be talking only for the first 2 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes. Jeff.
Yeah.
As long as you mute yourself and I'm talking, I'll do the same and you're talking.
I'm going to mute myself. Tell me if it's.
Sure. Fantastic. This is all good.
All right. So I just got to remember to mute myself when I'm not talking. Now, if I want to, no, that's the setup. Hold on for a second. So I'm looking, how do I screen share now?
So at the bottom of this, an icon that is the red slanting line on it.
Yeah. So if allow it, and wonderful. Right. And let me.
One the PowerPoint. Whichever section you want to maximize, you just double click on it.
Right. So I'm sharing full screen now. Does that look good for you?
It does.
Good.
If you want participants to see full screen, you have to double click on that. Oh, hold on 1 second. Yeah. So as long as the participant click on whichever section, I think this should work. So
okay.
Good.
Let me. Yeah, I'm gonna try to arrange the windows here. So I put you on my laptop. Yeah, I'll be able to arrange this and kind of go. So let's see if I. Oops, that's not gonna work for me. Okay. Maybe if I. Let's get rid of this. And is that big enough for you?
Yes. That's good.
Okay. And because some of these get a little detailed, so I might go to full screen. We'll see. And I might click in and out of full screen.
Perfectly.
I gotta remember to look at you and not that. So, all right. Good. All right.
So there you have 1 minute go. And while the session is live, the only ones who get heard is you and me. Okay. Any feedback participants will be through chat and I'll be monitoring.
Okay. And then I can what's going on here? There's a chat here.
Right.
So I can watch that back channel.
Right.
While we're going. All right. I'm going to see if I can raise my laptop up to see it better. All right. Good. It's a little bit better, but cool. Good. All right. So I'm going to stop that share for just a minute so they don't have to stare at this. We're cool. All righty.
Alrighty. So we have about 27 people. I would assume that the others are trickling in from the other.
Okay.
So Jeff, if you could please mute yourself, I will do the.
It's fine.
Okay. Beautiful. I can still hear the echo.
Oops.
Okay, all right, perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, so all right, so hello everybody and welcome. I hope you're enjoying the Scrum gathering. We originally thought that this would be a regional Scrum gathering. Turns out this is a global Scrum gathering. Thanks to the COVID situation, it's actually the adversity has been turned into an opportunity. But that said, hello and welcome again. I'm very excited to be here with you for this session on enterprise agility, and where we're going to talk about eating the impediments, a SAS approach. First, let me share with you the structure for this 60-minute session. There's three parts to it to make it easy for you. Part one is the speaker introduction, which I will get to in just a minute. Part two is we will talk about, our speaker will talk about the enterprise agility, eat the impediments SAS approach for about maybe 40 minutes. And part three is question and answers. For any questions that you may have along the session, please feel free to use the session chat window on the right panel. And I will be collecting the questions along the way. And towards the end, Jeff will be happy to answer those questions. Also, about halfway into the event, you will see the poll section on active. So feel free to take a minute to share your feedback for the session that we value very much. So without further ado, I will get to part one, which is our speaker for this session is a game-changing agile educator for global enterprises. He helps organizations improve their ability to improve. How cool is that? Coach and mentor professionals around the world. He's a Scrum Fellow and Scrum Trainer by Scrum Inc. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to welcome you, the speaker of the session, Jeff Stewart. Jeff, over to you.
Thank you so much. It's good to be with all of you, wherever you may be today. Those of you who know me well may know that it was my intention to relocate pretty much fully to India during this year. And those of you who know me well, that came true in a unusual manner in that I was actually caught there during the lockdown and spent 4.5 months in a hotel room in Calcutta. But this is that the world has gone this year. That relocating to India wasn't a permanent permanently wasn't going to be in the possibility. Relocating anywhere in the world, and this is kind of the time when we're all called home to wherever that home is. I have actually recently moved to my hometown in Grand Rapids, Michigan, in the Midwest of the United States. You see, I'm in this gorgeous little hotel room here. So I apologize. You're seeing a bed in back of me as I wait for a couple minutes to the place I'm going to be living opens up. But it's good to be with here. It kind of breaks my heart. Hyderabad is one of my homes away from home, and so I kind of breaks my heart that I'm not there now. I'll there with you in person, and I hope that we are again be able to get together in person next year, or maybe even sooner, if life would have it that way. So I'm here to talk about dealing with impediments at the enterprise level. And the title, as it came out in the schedule, says an SAS. This is not about SAS, the statistical software company. It's about Scrum at Scale. It should be S at S, not Scrum at SAS. And so Scrum at Scale, you'll get a bit of a crash course in this as we go into our conversation. But Scrum at Scale was the approach to scaling using Scrum in the entire enterprise that was created by Jeff Sutherland. It's only been taught for about 2.5 years. So among the scaling frameworks, it's one of the newer ones. But it's one of the things that is distinct about it is that it's not just targeted at technology work. It's to scale Scrum in the entire enterprise, and we'll talk about how important that is. as we get into this conversation here. So I'm going to share my slides here, and I will probably turn my camera off. Actually, we'll do this. So you should see, well, a copy of me, but now hopefully we should see now. Oops, it's sharing the wrong screen. So bear with me a second. I have to give me a second here. I have to, because I'm using two screens here, it's sharing the wrong one. So let's try that. And let's move you there. Now we should be seeing the right thing. Hopefully you see a thing called for eating the impediments. And what I'm actually going to do here is make this bigger, and I'll switch in and out of that as we go along so you can see it clearer. All right. So first of all, what are we talking about when we're talking about scaling to the entire enterprise? We're talking about playing the game big with Scrum, not just with a team, but with an entire enterprise. Because the experience that definitely Jeff Sutherland at Scrum Inc. and a lot of practitioners around the world have is that there's, as you know, there's a difference with Scrum but. Just, well, we're doing Scrum in this company, but we're not quite doing, maybe we're just not doing the product owner thing, or we don't have sprint reviews, or we just don't, we only do the retrospectives once in a while. And Scrum Inc.'s research has shown that if you're doing Scrum but, you're really not going to become much better at delivery. You only get about a 5% increase in process efficiency. But if you're actually practicing Scrum well, you're actually becoming fluent across multiple teams with Scrum, then the process efficiency can get up to 50%, 10 times the increase. So let's, first of all, let's give you a little crash course at Scrum at Scale. But it's for those of you who are familiar with Scrum, this should look pretty familiar. So, right from the Scrum Guide, we say the Scrum is a framework within which people can address complex adaptive problems while proactively in delivering products of the highest possible value. That's straight from the Scrum Guide. Scrum at Scale is virtually the same approach, except we have, instead of people within teams, we have networks of Scrum teams that are all operating consistently with the Scrum Guide. And when they get they get the same kind of results. So I joke around at what a big expansion Scrum at Scale that model is. The Scrum Guide is 18 pages long. The Scrum at Scale guide is 19 pages long. So it carries that kind of simplicity. And that the same simple rules that apply at Scrum also apply at Scrum at Scale. And the one distinctions that's different from other approaches is that this could be any kind of product. It applies across the whole organization. So this is a quick picture of the Scrum at Scale network. And the reason I wanted to show you this is that it still retains the same 3 simple roles as Scrum. You see in the team, there's a middle. In the middle, there are teams. Now we're just having a network of teams, but the team stays in the center. And there's instead of a single Scrum Master, you have a network of Scrum Masters that all operate according to a certain cycle, and the product owner. So I'm not going to go over the whole Scrum at Scale framework today, but the point of showing you this here are the same 3 simple roles: team, Scrum Master, product owner. And we retain that simplicity and scale it to a whole bunch of, to a wide level. Now, this is what this slide I'm going to explain is. This is the game we are playing when we really take clearing impediments seriously. So the Putnam model is a model for measuring the productivity of software organizations. There's a wonderful Wikipedia article about it if you look it up. And the point I'm trying to make here is that we know that we've known from a lot of research for a long time that an experienced developer, somebody that's very fluent in both the process and the technology, can do things 10 to 20 times faster than a new developer or somebody who's new to Scrum or new to the process. So we know that from a lot of research. But what people don't consider is that also applies to entire organizations. If your organization and your enterprise is very experienced and fluent in this stuff, then the capability of the organization can be in 2 orders of magnitude more, 1 to 200 times. So this productivity index, you could see that a scale of 1 is 2,098 times better. Multiply that by 20, and you can see organizations that are really fluent in doing Scrum can have hyper productive results. And that's the game we're playing here. We're not just playing saying we do Scrum at work. This is you're playing for big business results when you're doing this. And what you're looking for, excuse me, in your organization is something known as linear scalability. If you want to scale exponentially your use of Scrum and get that kind of productivity results, you have to operate by the Scrum Guide, those simple rules. Don't add a whole bunch of rules. Don't add new structures, because if you do, you introduce waste into the system. And so if you have an organization that can scale linearly, retain those simple rules, it retains the same ability to scale that nature has. So that's the kind of thing we're shooting for. So again, we're gonna start focusing in, and now you're gonna get a crash course on a portion of the Scrum framework before we start digging in deeper in how to do impediments. So I mentioned before, there's the team process in the center with the Scrum Master and the product owner there. And we're going to focus in on the Scrum Master cycle, because that's when we're talking about removing impediments, that's where the action happens. You see, you have a team there in the middle, and the first thing they really have to master when working as a network of teams is how do a group of teams together, whether it's 5, 10, 100, or excuse me, or 1,000 teams, how do they remove impediments together? And Scrum at Scale has a very familiar structure on how to do this. So let's just get a little bit of iconography down. There's a Scrum team, one Scrum team, and this team has a Scrum Master and a product owner, and there we have 5 team members on this team. So we're all familiar, hopefully, with what a Scrum Master does. They serve the team, protecting from interruptions. They ensure the work and impediments are made visible. All the stuff you see there, we're familiar with that the Scrum Master does. So there you see one team with a Scrum Master, product owner, and the team working. Now, when we start scaling Scrum in an organization using Scrum at Scale, we've got an entity called a Scrum of Scrums. A lot of you might be familiar with the term Scrum of Scrums, but within the Scrum at Scale framework, it's not an event. It's not a meeting. We'll talk about a meeting in a minute, but it is not a meeting. So the picture you see there, the same way you have one team that's responsible for delivering value frequently, delivering value at the end of every sprint. Here you have, in this example, 5 teams that are collectively responsible for delivering something together. Every team has a Scrum Master, every team has a product owner, but those 5 teams have to deliver something, some bit of value every sprint. So we're retaining the simple structure. You could see just the same way this team has 5 development members. Here's a team, here's 5 teams working together. Those 5 teams together have a scaled daily Scrum. That's the meeting. So that's not, we don't call it a Scrum of Scrums. We'll call it a scaled daily Scrum. And that exists to do the same kind of work that a daily Scrum would do for a team. It just mirrors those. The 5 teams get together and replan how they're going to get through the day, and how they can anywhere they're surfacing impediments, they work that together. We'll get into some techniques for actually doing that within a scale daily Scrum in a minute. But I want to carry through this model. So you see 5 teams working together in a scrum of scrums. They hold a scaled daily scrum every day. And then in a bigger organization, you start scaling this model up. Here we've got a scrum of scrums with 5 teams, 5 scrum of scrums working together, which have a scrum of scrums. And in the center, you have something called the executive action team. Now, they're accountable for things like leading the strategy and the quality of the scrum in the whole organization. But we're not going to delve, that's kind of beyond what we're talking about today, because today we are talking about how do you remove impediments in large systems of teams like this. The example you see here has 125 teams across this whole organization. And the acronym for Executive Action Team was chosen very specifically by Jeff Sutherland, because the purpose of the Executive Action Team is to eat the impediments, to eat up anything that's at a systemic level that's getting in the way of the entire organization. Things that cannot be handled at the team level. Things about budget, hiring, you have corporate policies that are getting in the way. And I'll tell a couple good stories about that from India as we go on. So they're executing the strategy, but their most important role is to eat the impediments. And some of the things, when I tell stories about this, what seemed like very simple impediments at a team level ended up uncovering huge systemic impediments that at some time impacted the whole country. And I'll tell a story about that. So who is on this executive action team? You need, and this is why it's important, you don't want that executive action team just to be a committee of people that are interested in Agile. No, this executive action team has real accountability. So you've got to have somebody that can change policy without having to ask permission. A COO or a CIO or a CTO. COOs often make good leaders of executive action teams. Somebody who can write a check, a vice president of finance. Hopefully, if we get time, I'll tell a great story about that one. So you need somebody who can write a check. It's good to have somebody who is an Agile champion, right? So somebody who can actually help influence the other people on how this structure can actually help them. And then somebody from people ops, if you have hiring or any other kind of policy decisions related to people policies or getting people hired, and somebody in organizations that are highly regulated, have a lot of regulations to deal with, somebody from legal and compliance. So you excuse me for the coughing, and it's just a little bit of asthma, no COVID here. So you have to have people that are actually really empowered to do stuff on the executive action team. This is not somebody that's not a group that's just interested in Agile. And they are there to help all the teams succeed by driving things done. And so they remove the big sticky impediments. I'll have a fascinating story to tell about that once we get through this thing. But the EAT's responsibility is to help these networks of teams succeed. In the same way that a Scrum Master role is to help a single team succeed, that the EAT is responsible for eating those impediments in helping the whole organization succeed. So a scaled daily Scrum is very similar to a daily Scrum. But the other thing, we're always looking, but we ask this question: do we see any impediments that prevent a whole team from meeting the goal, or a network of teams? So we're asking, let's say you have a Scrum of Scrums with 5 teams in it. Is there any way we as a group of 5 teams together are getting in each other's way? Are we causing impediments for each other? And they work through those the same way you would make those visible during a daily Scrum with a team. You make it visible among a network of teams, in the Scaled Daily Scrum. So I'm going to give you one quick example here of how an organization that actually was just starting out with Scrum was using this approach. So this is actually coaching I did a while ago at General Motors Corporation. This was actually quite a few years, and this division I was working with in Detroit, Michigan, had never really had an on-time bug-free delivery. They were a very, very waterfall organization. And so we, right out of the gate, started trying to use these structures, even before a lot of teams were even fluent in Scrum. So this is a program board for a big release. And you can't even see all of it because involved in this program were 23 teams. So you have over 20 teams, and the program manager, who was to shepherd a big release through, he declared this is about 4 months out from their release, that potentially everything was a potential impediment. So the first thing he did, you see on the board at the bottom of the board, is he had all the teams come in and put their entire backlog on the bottom. And what you're seeing here is the results of a lot of scaled daily scrums. There's the backlog on the bottom. There's what's currently in progress by each of the teams. And the top, there's where a whole team is blocked, usually by another team. So we had, I can tell you, 23 teams. Even with 23 teams, we had a scaled daily scrum that lasted 20 minutes or less. Right? We had 23 teams here. This is actually not something I would recommend on your first try doing it with that number of teams, but we tried it out here, and that was the result. And for really important, you can see tiny little avatars we put on potentially huge impediments that we have, and there's one that was blocked seriously. So when they had their daily scrum, and you can't even see all of it, this is what it looked like. Here's the program manager. This was such a large program. You had he had a full-time project manager working with him. And notice, these aren't necessarily people who were practicing Scrum at the team level. Some of these people represented teams that were practicing Scrum. Some of them were mainframe legacy teams. Some of them were third-party marketing associates. Some of them were third-party hardware integrators. Since this is an automobile, there's a lot of third-party components. So everybody involved in this release, 23 teams, was present either in person or virtually every day. You notice we have at the top, there's high resolution video. There was a wide angle, high resolution camera in back, and every day people had to show up. Now, the other thing I want to point out is you see here a vice president, and the executives, when we started doing this, said that when they did these, got all these impediments visible and doing Scale of Daily Scrum, it was the first time, and some of them had been there for 20 years, the first time they had ever gotten accurate, honest result, honest visibility into what thing was going on. They were used to getting these status reports from project managers for years and years, and they were inaccurate or sometimes outright lies. Then when they did this, they got it the first time, and the result of this, it was really their first on-time bug-free delivery they had ever had in the organization. And that was really starting to use some of these Scrum at Scale practices. It is absolutely possible within Scrum at Scale to use this in organizations where all the teams don't have to be Scrum. If you're a practitioner of Scaled Agile Framework, Scaled Agile Framework actually works quite well within Scrum at Scale, right? The point is to get the impediments visible and eat the impediments as an organization. Now there's a model, and I'm gonna show you this, and then I'm gonna tell a couple stories. So there's a model here for how this often works in a lot of organizations. So teams, you see a scrum of scrums, and you got teams here, and somebody on a team could raise an impediment, right? And there's often a model, and it's often like a 48-hour model, that if the Scrum Master can't remove that in 48 hours, it goes to a scrum of scrums. And maybe if it's a bigger organization, do a scrum 48 hours later. And then, according to that schedule, it ends up on the executive action team. I'm going to show you a real example of this in a minute. But if they can't be addressed according to that schedule at the lower level, then it ends up on the EAT. And the EAT destroys the impediment. It's really important you maintain a rhythm around this, removing impediments this way. So here's an example. This is an example from I coached at for quite a long time, about a year, at an organization in Bangalore. And so this was a technology product. It actually was in the broadcast and satellite world. Some of you, I might actually have some of my people I work with in this session there. So you can see, this is what you see here is a board with 3 teams working together. And the 3 teams are serving one customer as part of this organization. So you got 3 teams developing features in service of one customer there. So if this is their impediment board, anytime anybody from a team member has an impediment, they put it in this top board there. The Scrum Master looks at it, and they're looking over here in the current obstacles. Now, this organization had that kind of 48-hour process. If the Scrum Master couldn't remove the impediment in 48 hours, then they moved it over, and then it would get dealt with what they called a leadership team, which was the Scrum Master, product owner, and architect, and they had a role called an engineering manager together. If they couldn't remove, it wasn't the strict Scrum at Scale framework, but it's something pretty similar. So you have a 3-team Scrum of Scrums, that if a Scrum Master, individual Scrum Master, can't remove the impediment, well, then it goes up to a higher level, and that leadership team works at it together. If they can't remove it, then it goes to a director level board, which we'll look at in a minute. But you can see, if, in the center here, if an impediment is believed to be cleared, it's put in the middle for the team to remove, because it's the team that decides whether an impediment is removed or not. And so at the bottom, they use the term smashed, and you can see all those impediments that they removed. So that actually says something, that they were really serious about doing this. Now, I mentioned if it's not done, say, the Scrum Master gets 48 hours, the leadership teams get 48 hours. If they can't raise it, then it goes to a director level board. This was about a 3,000 person organization. And you can see anybody in the organization could come up and look at one of these boards. These are the staff here. These are all senior directors in charge of large networks of teams for customers. These were divided up into market areas: the Americas, Europe, and Asia. And then you had a chief architect, and at the bottom, the brand new role, which was whoops, we're seeing Iyengar too fast here. So so you can see there at the bottom. Now, if you're the chief product owner, same thing. If you look at the bottom, there are impediments that they think have been removed, and for the team to be taken back to the team to review, and the stuff they smashed at the bottom. If you were standing facing this board, you could turn around and you would see the impediment board for the vice president, the leader of the entire organization. And so anybody in the organization could open that, could look at that. If this wasn't there, if this board, if these people couldn't remove their impediments in 48 hours, that automatically went to the vice president. No reason for not improving that. Didn't matter if the impediment was maybe cleared. It got promoted to a new level. So I'm gonna stop sharing this for a second, because I wanna ask a couple stories. I'm gonna tell you a couple stories. So let's turn this off a second so I can just be looking at you. All right, so now I want to tell you a story of how this worked in an organization I was working with just last year. So about a year ago right now, I was doing a lot of coaching in India, and I was working on behalf of a client in the United States that was a large insurance company with development teams. At the time, they were working with development teams in Chennai, uh, Kolkata, Coimbatore, and Hyderabad. So you have four different cities they had development teams in. And I first arrived and was working with the teams in Chennai. And I was observing the individual teams' daily scrums, and they were horrible. And the reason for that was that the team members, the audio visual equipment they had on their PCs was horrible. They were really simple, cheap machines, and so people were dialing in from their cheap desk phones, and as a result, there was so much background noise and so much chaos as just from all this noise happening in the background that the daily scrums were ineffective. They were ended up being status reports because nobody could hear anything, hear each other between the United States and India. And so what would happen is they just basically they just waited for their name to be called and gave their update, and then they tuned out because they couldn't hear anything else. And the solution to this was very simple. The solution was to get a headset. All right, if everybody had headsets, that would cut out all this horrible background noise. So that seems pretty simple. You had four teams between a couple cities there. That was Chennai and Coimbatore, and maybe you need headsets for 50 people. So this is in India. The people were working for one of the large IT service companies, one of the larger ones. I won't say who it is. And so the Scrum Master went to order 50 headsets, and the message he got back from the purchasing organization was, oh, 50 headsets. We're going to have to put that out for bids, and it's going to take at least 6 weeks to get those. Absolutely. If you're a Scrum Master that wants to remove that impediment, that's absolutely unacceptable. My team is being blocked from having effective daily scrums with their colleagues in the United States. We got to remove that impediment now. So the Scrum Master did exactly what you should do in that situation, is that he promoted that issue to the Scrum of Scrums. All right? So the Scrum of Scrums got together, and the Scrum of Scrums had representatives of kind of the middle management layers. And these are middle managers in the large IT services company. And they said, you know what? It's purchasing. There's nothing we can do about it. Right? So we're just going to have to live with it. The Scrum Master for that team didn't take that for an answer, right? Because he is committed to get that removed, get that impediment removed. And so when that didn't get removed at the Scrum level, he promoted that to the executive action team. And I can remember exactly being on the call where this impediment came up. And he's raising the impediment. We can't get these headsets purchased. Purchasing at this company says it's going to take 6 weeks. And the middle managers did the same thing. They're like, oh, there's nothing we can do. This is just purchasing. It's a big company. You just deal with it. And at that meeting was the vice president from the large IT services firm who was in charge of this multi-million-dollar account. And he sees what the issue is immediately, is that here we are, it's a multi-million-dollar account, and we're having an impediment to spend a couple $100 on 50 headsets. And so he looked at his middle managers and he said, you know what? I've been hearing about this impediment for 2 weeks now, and I really don't want to hear about it anymore. So that was the message there. And in 2 days, the head started flowing in. Let me do a quick time check here to make sure we're okay. There's one other part of the story I want to share, and then we're going to wrap up with a few slides and then take questions. There was one other impediment, and this is an impediment that I would love one of my colleagues in India to take up, is that they still were as a 2-day delay because it had to be approved by some bureaucrat. Every headset had to get a stamp by some bureaucrat at the special economic zone. It was located in a special economic zone. And I want to raise that. This is an impediment in India. Special economic zones exist to help companies be better. But I have experienced, because of the bureaucracy, I've experienced huge delays I've seen in simple things for companies that are in special economic zones. This is something where simple thing, you can help your whole country more competitive if you're willing to take that impediment up. All right? All right. Quick thing, couple slides, and then we'll have time for a few questions. That is BKS Iyengar, if you don't know who that is, one of the modern masters of Hatha Yoga. He passed away about 4 or 5 years ago, lived until the ripe age of 95 years old. And he said something about change and transformation in an organization. And he said change leads to disappointment if it's not sustained. So we're not just looking for one change, we're looking for continuous change. And transformation is sustained change. And the way you get at that is for practice. There's no silver bullet that's going to come into. So here's one of a famous thing. That's called Virabhadrasana 2, the warrior pose. There he is as a young man there. But you can see what he's doing is creating extension and space. And he always said that kind of space you're getting that because that gets freedom. Here in this example is an organization creating space. All right? This is an organization creating space and freedom for itself by removing impediments. All right. So you can find more about Scrum at Scale at scrumatscale.scruminc.com. Okay. If I could take 1 minute of your time before we answer questions, I want to give a little pin. Question?
Yeah, we just don't see your screen. You can start screen share. So we move on for another 8.
Oh, for God's sakes. Great. Let's go back. Let's see what we missed. Sorry, I'm going to skip back a little bit. I apologize. Oh, and now it's doing this funny thing. All right, hold on for a second. I have to drag this. This Hopin is too smart for its own good once in a way. All right, sorry about that. There is BKS Iyengar, right? And there's the thing where he said, change leads to disappointment if it's not sustained, right? And transformation is sustained change, and it's achieved through practice. There he is. He is a younger man practicing Virabhadrasana 2, or the warrior pose. But he's not going to war in that pose. He is creating space. He's creating extension, and through that, creating freedom for him. So what that might look like a messy impediment board, that organization is creating space and freedom for itself to do things in this organization with 3,000 people. All right? Hundreds of teams they had with 3,000 people there. And they are creating freedom for themselves by removing those systemic impediments. All right. Again, you can find more about Scrum at Scale at scrumatscale.scruminc.com. There are a number of classes available. We have a lot of great trainers in India. I'll be doing one online in about 6 weeks from now. There's a calendar up there so you can see upcoming courses if you want to learn the fundamentals of Scrum at Scale. One more thing before we end, if I could steal a minute of your time before questions. On October 2nd, I am publishing a book. And it is called An Agilist in India, A Journey Through Kudai Raj. And it is my offering, after practicing that for a couple of years, my offering of why I believe that India and the subcontinent are the great fertile ground for agility on Earth. And why I really believe that our predicament on Earth right now cannot improve without the role that India in the subcontinent can play. That the healing of the earth through all these things we're experiencing with climate and pandemic and conflict around the world is going to emerge from that part of the world. So that's publishing on October 2nd. It's at agilistinIndia.com, or if you go to Facebook, it's just look for An Agilist in India. That book, I will guarantee, it's not going to be a free book, but I will guarantee that you will be able to afford it, which is all I'll say about that. All right, let's stop the share and see what we have for questions. Can you question? Can you pre-order the book? No, you cannot pre-order the book. But don't worry about it. You will, there will be a big announcement on October 2nd. If you go to the website, you can sign up for the mail list or sign up on Facebook, and you will see a big announcement, and you will be able to afford the book. I guarantee. All right. Somebody is asking. Oh, do you want to prioritize the questions, Krishna?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. There's a bunch of questions that came in. One of those, and I think I saw this repeated multiple times, so I think that gets a higher rank. The question is, what is SAFe and how is this different from Scrum at scale? So that's a question that appeared like 3 times.
Okay. Well, there are a number of frameworks for scaling the use of Agile in an organization. The most popular one is called the Scaled Agile Framework, or SAFe, right? Another one is called Large Scale Scrum, or LESS. If you work with Scrum, if you're certified by Scrum.org, they have an approach called Nexus. Scrum at Scale is just another approach to scaling, but it is one of the things that makes Scrum at Scale distinct, right? Is it maintains the simplicity of the Scrum framework. Okay, it doesn't impose a lot of new structures or a lot of new meetings the way that Scaled Agile Framework does. That is a huge distinction. The other huge distinction is that it is for the entire organization. HR, marketing, legal, the entire organization, improving the entire organization's ability to deliver. This is about delivering hyper-productive business results across the whole organization, where Scaled Agile Framework is really focused on technology product delivery and improving that according to some very structured approaches. Scrum at Scale is a simple framework for that the whole organization can engage in, and where the whole organization wants to focus its gauge, that's where you can that's how you can improve. Hopefully that answered those questions. I can't answer a whole questions on SAFe. I know I'm certified at a level that a lot of you are on it. I've really chosen to focus on Scrum at Scale because it has that great freedom. The subtitle of the Scrum at Scale framework is incrementally crafting the right organization. So it doesn't impose a structure on you. It uses the simple Scrum framework and lets the organization evolve to what it makes sense for them. The same way a team can self-organizes, this is Scrum at Scale allows an entire enterprise to self-organize.
Great.
I hope that answers.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. Sure it does. There's another question where somebody seems to be impressed with the Scrum at Scale, and they're asking this question. I think it's Anthony who's asking this question and saying, how long does it take for the training and implementation for a team of 150 members take if they want to go through a transformation of Scrum at Scale? So
this is one thing where it's let's say if you know Scaled Agile Framework, one area is where it's different well. So, there's a basic 2-day training course for a Scrum at Scale practitioner. And that gives anybody the ability to come in and start practicing Scrum at Scale. Now, there are about 20 components if you take the 2-day course. And what you do is when you walk out of that course, walk out of that course with a transformation backlog to figure out where you should work at scaling Scrum in your organization. For a lot of organizations, they start out, we don't have an executive action team that can eat the impediments. So that's the thing where they start out, but not all of them. Some of them are going to invest in technical practices. So the thing with Scrum at Scale is that you walk out of the training, whoever is coming into it, with a backlog to work on Scrumming Scale in your own organization. It doesn't inflict a big system. Now, you asked if I get about 100 people. There's one thing about with scaling, particularly a Scrum at Scale, we recommend is that you don't start big. Start with maybe a few teams. All right. Start with just maybe having a few teams. Christian, you might want to mute yourself a second because people are complaining about the echo. So I know when he and I go back and forth, we start echoing. Where was I? Oh, when you're starting to scale an organization, start with 5, maybe 10 teams and prove success, because your most difficult impediments are going to come out right in the beginning. So find out and show what successful scaling Scrum looks at 5 teams before you blow it up to 100 teams. That's one other distinction from Scaled Agile Framework, where Scaled Agile Framework says train everyone out of the gate. We're like, start to learn how to do this with a handful of teams and then spread it out and get better. When I worked that example I showed you from that organization in Bangalore, that's how we started out. We did about 10 teams at a time and we scaled up gradually. We didn't do all 3,000 people at the same time. And that's generally the most successful way to do that. All right.
So the message is to so Jeff, I think we should mute each other. So let me ask the next couple of questions. Thank you. So the next couple of questions that I'm hearing is, do we have any statistics around the adoption of Scrum at scale versus Nexus versus Safe? Do we have any adoption metrics or?
I don't, because I'm focused on Scrum at scale and teaching people that, right? I don't, and I see somebody already asked, how can we implement Safe for support engagement? I am not talking about Scaled Agile Framework here. I can talk about, I can talk about how Scrum at scale, and actually a sub-organization using Scaled Agile Framework can operate as a subset of an organization using Scrum at scale. Right, so I can talk about that, but I can't talk in detail about Scrum at scale or the other frameworks. I can talk in great deal about Scrum at scale, but I can't talk in great deal about Safe for the other frameworks.
Beautiful, very, very smartly answered, Jeff. So thank you. There's one other question that I thought was interesting, where somebody asked, isn't the PMO of a conventional organization not eating impediments just the way it's outlined in the Scrum at scale? Is this just, are these parallel roles, or is there a clear difference? That's another question.
So look, I'll be blunt, right? There is no project manager role within the Scrum framework, and there is no project management office role in the Scrum at Scale framework. In my experience, project management offices, when they get into Scrum, start doing what traditional project management offices always do. They collect metrics, they look at schedules and things like that, because they're just not oriented. This is a completely new role to remove impediments. So I have never, ever in my experience, I've been at this for almost 14 years now, have never seen a project management office effectively deal with removing impediments, because their orientation, is like project managers are, is on reporting and status. So they'll be able to tell you about the impediments, but I don't want to know about the impediments. I want the impediment cleared, right? And that's why an executive action team is so much more effective than a traditional PMO, right? Knowing about something isn't near just getting it cleared, right?
This is a takeaway that I have, and I'm sure friends also have, is that we don't want many more order takers and just reporting individuals. We want people who actually can drive the change and clear impediments, get those out of the way, so we can deliver value to customers. So this is a fantastic answer. So another very interesting question there, Jeff. Let me tell you. I saw this one. Okay, so sorry. So I think, yeah. So in the context of scale, how do we ensure self-organization is ensured, by a Scrum Master or a coach? That's one of the questions that I have. And there's another one. I thought this one's even more interesting. It says, can we assess an organization to figure out whether Scrum at scale is a good fit for this organization or not? How do we test waters before we make the investment? I think that's a
I'm going to answer the second question first, right? How do you measure and how do we know it's being effective? At Scrum at Scale, out of the gate, we are looking for real specific business results. I talked about the executive action team removing impediments, right? I'm going to tell you another organization I worked with in the United States last year. It was a transportation manufacturing company. It had a new CEO who was very fluent in Scrum at Scale. And his challenge to his organization was simple. We need to triple the revenue of this company in 2 years. There's your measurable result. Are you working towards that using Scrum at Scale? Right? If you're not, what's getting in the way of that? So we're talking about specific measurable results. Jeff Sutherland says, traded company, if you start using Scrum at Scale across the organization, if you're not thinking of doubling your stock price, you're not trying hard enough, right? So this is real specific business results, revenue, cost cutting, market share. So we're not trying to just become agile here, right? We're talking about hyper productive results. Let me stop there. So I could go on for a long time about that one, but I'll stop right there to see if any other questions.
I think those words by yourself and Jeff Sutherland are fantastic. I think to motivate individuals to try Scrum.
Yeah, if you want to see some specific examples, go to the Scrum at Scale website that I showed the URL as. There are great case studies. What can be somebody just asked, what can be the measurable? Well, I'm going to tell you, during the Scrum at Scale course, we give a case study of how Saab Aerospace built a fighter jet with Scrum. And one of their results was, has time to market and cost reduced 75%. Boom, there's a huge impact. And the answer was yes. It's a really dramatic case study on how a fighter jet, a big piece of complex hardware, got built and iterated using Scrum. Yeah.
Okay, so we have a few more minutes. Maybe we have time for one more question before we wrap up, Jeff. The last question that I saw was, I think it's very encouraging to see that there are organizations and case studies where this has proved to be very successful. How in terms of gauging whether this is the right organization which will benefit using, not, is there any entry criteria that you look for, qualifier?
So about that, excuse me. We start out the class talking about where does Scrum fail in organizations, right? And it fails in one of three ways. One of them is the organization can't deliver. That means across all the teams, can they deliver real stuff every iteration? There are impediments that. What impediments can you get away of? You can't prioritize across the organization. You can't focus on the most important stuff. The third one is you can't iterate or refactor the organization itself. We know that when in any done it, using Scrum right out of the gate is gonna surface huge impediments that maybe has existed for many years. The purchasing example is one example. Now there, you had a good vice president that was willing to eat that impediment. If you don't have a set of an executive action team and good who's willing to remove impediments, and you don't have a good level team structure that can deliver and prioritize every sprint, fundamental stuff, right? If you can't deliver, you're not going to be able to scale Scrum well. If you can't prioritize on the right stuff, you're not going to be able to scale Scrum well. And if you can't refactor the organization, you're going to have trouble with that. So if you got to look at your organization, are we willing to do this, right? Are we willing to do this way? If you are, you can get hyper productive results. If you aren't, you're just doing scrum butt.
Awesome. I think time, Jeff.
I see one more question. Quick question. Is there any certification? The 2-day practitioner course, you will walk out being a certified Scrum at Scale practitioner with a certificate signed by Jeff Sutherland. I'll go that if you take that 2-day course.
All right. So good stuff, Jeff. I think this was very enlightening. I think it's great to know about Scrum at Scale. So thank you very much for carving out the time and sharing with us about Scrum at Scale and for answering all of these wonderful questions. I certainly had a lot of takeaways, especially about focusing on people who can clear impediments rather than people who can just report on them. I think that to me is one of the biggest takeaways that I will be able to use at work. So thank you so very much, and thanks to participants who've joined. I see we have 149 people. And I think that's fantastic. So Jeff, that speaks volumes about your popularity here, and so that's cool. Jeff, do you have anything in closing remarks that you want to share?
Back tomorrow morning with another session about acing your Scrum Master performance review. So even though performance reviews are evil, a lot of us have to live with them. So I'll have a session tomorrow morning about that.
Awesome. Look forward to that. Hopefully our friends can join us as well. So thanks much. Have a good day. And Jeff, you have a great day. Everybody else have a good night. Thank you very much. Bye now.